LGRs Talking Property is brought to you in association with Duplex Care Limited, giving you peace of mind with your property's plumbing, gas, heating and electrical systems. Let Duplex care for you. The views and opinions expressed on LGRs Talking Property are those of the host, guests and contributors, and are not necessarily those of London Greek Radio. While all facts, figures and statistics are carefully researched, listeners should check before taking any action based on information and advice offered in this programme. LGRs Talking Property with Carl Knipe.
Good evening. Welcome to Wednesday night's edition of LGRs Talking Property. My name is Carl Knipe and I'll be with you in the questioner's chair for the next 55 minutes, chatting to my superb and engaging guests about all things property. Tonight we'll be trying to unravel further the cladding scandal and ask, is there any good news for owners of flats in buildings without cladding who are trying to sell or remortgage their property? We'll look to Paul Champolina for a real-time evictions and tiers update. We'll ask whether interest-free government guaranteed rent arrear loans for tenants should be introduced, and should the Treasury be allowed to raid or dip in and use landlords' money to prop up the private landlord rental sector. Predictions. It's a funny old game, to coin a phrase used by possibly the greatest goal scorer ever, Mr. Jimmy Greaves. We'll look at what my three guests thought might happen to property prices and the property market some 12 months ago, and what in fact has happened and where they predict the market will find itself this time next year. There's more action on this programme than an opening scene of James Bond film. Put your questions to tonight's guests. Text us on 0737 6611 or messages on Twitter at LGR Talk Property, or email studio@lgr.co.uk and have your say and ask away. Back for another round of sparring is my first guest this evening. Always the affable and knowledgeable Mr. Paul Champolina. Regular listeners to the programme will know Paul spent more than 25 years helping landlords with tenant problems. He's founded Landlord Action in 1999, which is widely considered the UK's leading provider of buy-to-let legal advice. Left school at 16 with no formal qualifications, and has never been without a job, from working as a bailiff and tracing agent through to selling Landlord Action in 2017, where he still remains a director and brand ambassador. He's moving up the celebrity ladder due to his Channel 5 programme Nightmare Tenants Slum Landlords, which has been airing over the last few weeks. Nearly an A-lister, Paul, with all your media exposure. Let me add, but don't hold it against me, Paul is also a massive Spurs fan and boxing enthusiast. He still gets in the ring. Welcome, Paul, and thanks for being ready to rumble with us this evening.
Oh, good evening. How are you?
I'm very good indeed. I see on your social media, Paul, that this morning you've taken advantage of Tier 2 and stepped back in the gym for a workout.
I've missed it like no one's business. I want to ask you one question before we move on.
Oh, yes.
Who are top of the league?
Let's move on from that. This is a property programme, Paul, not a sports programme. So Paul's preparing to spar with my other guest this evening, as per usual. My second guest is Mark Hayward, who's the Chief Executive of the NAEA, or National Association of Estate Agents, Property Mark. Mark Hayward has extensive experience in property, covering sales and lettings. He's previously acted as consultant to national and regional developers, housing associations and property companies. He now sits on a number of committees, including HM Government's Economic Crime Strategic Board and on the NHBC, or the National House Building Council, the Land Registry Advisory Council and HMR's Stamp Duty Land Tax Working Together Stakeholder Group. Mark is also on the board of the Tenancy Deposit Scheme and the Property Ombudsman Corps. I don't know how you find time for everything then, Paul. On behalf of our listeners, a warm welcome and a very good evening. Thank you for joining us for the first time.
Thank you, Carl. Good to be here.
Great to have you with it. Now, Mark, I believe you were looking to retire and go off in the sunset in a few weeks, but a little birdie tells me you're now going to take on a new role of Chief Policy Advisor at the organisation. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. The Board of Property Mark has asked me to delay my retirement, which means I will continue to spend a lot of time in a small room in my house, because that's the only place we can go to. But it seemed a good opportunity. But I'll be representing in terms of policy, sales, lettings, auctioneers, everything. So an exciting time ahead.
Brilliant. Great to have you with us, I say. My third, final but never last guest, adding his own brand of style, candour and knowledge, is the irrepressible Mr. Russell Quirk. Regular listeners to Talking Property will know Russell is never shy of airing his opinions and loves nothing better than a controversial debate over social media. He is, though, a much respected grandee of the property world, a 25-year veteran of estate agent. I do say that regular.
No, keep it coming. That's fine.
Both traditional and online. Today he's pursuing a dual career track of both estate agency and director at Keller Williams Estate Agents, and a public relations and property guru for his co-founded PR agency Propaganda, which is flying high. Russell can often be heard on various radio stations giving opinions on all things property related or not. Russell, thanks so much for taking time out of your hectic schedule to join us. Thank you and welcome back.
Yeah, thanks, Carl, and hi everybody else. And look, thanks for getting my age right. That doesn't often happen.
Well, you know what it is I'm like Mark. I've been in a room for a few months, and all the days and all the ages all seem to have just come into one scenario. So there we have tonight's guests in all their splendour. But before we begin dissecting the property topics of the day, I have to ask Paul about this picture circulating on social media platforms of him outside the railings of the White House. So did Biden and the Democrats finally run out of patience with removing Trump, Paul, and decided to send an SOS for Shamps himself to evict Trump?
Well, I'm happy to take all jobs on. I'm happy to go over to the pond, Carl. And there's been a lot of talk about me speaking we just started a mediation business, actually, with the property redress scheme. And I'm going to try mediation first with Mr. Trump. And if that doesn't work, well, then we're going to have to try and get the bailiffs in.
Well, as Mr. Trump would say...
You're going to try and talk sense into Donald Trump. Good luck with that, mate.
I've got a long wait, I'm sure.
It'll be a beautiful thing. It'll be a beautiful thing. So let's have your questions this evening for Russell, Mark and Paul on any property-related subject that they will try and answer between now and 8 p.m. Text them on 0737 66 11033. Message them on Twitter at LGR Talk Property or email them at studio@lgr.co.uk. Ask away. In the next hour, we want to hear from you. We're here to help and inform you. It's your programme. Now, following on from last month's programme, where we discussed the cladding scandal, Mark De Silva wrote an article for the Property Eye on the 23rd of November stating that owners of flats in buildings without cladding will no longer need an EWS1 form to sell or remortgage their property. That's following a new agreement reached between the government and the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors. The regulations introduced to improve fire safety following the Grenfell fire inadvertently left many flat owners trapped in a near unsellable properties and homes. These regulations, when implemented, meant that mortgages for flats in buildings over 18 metres tall would only be approved if they had passed an external wall file review, EWS1 survey. It seems, though, that the government and the RICS, Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors, have agreed now that buildings without cladding do not need an EWS1 form, clearing the way for up to nearly 450,000 flat owners to sell, move or remortgage their homes. It seems the mortgage lenders didn't read the memo, though, as they have said they did not consent to the announcement of changes, even after the government had claimed the UK Finance and Building Societies Association had also approved the new agreement. Now, Mark, I know you've been following this development. It seems to be one heck of a mess, with confusion and distress just being compounded by the government. Why would they make these statements without first agreeing them with the mortgage lenders?
Well, I think, absolutely why, because it's the mortgage lenders who are taking the very firm line on this, and it's not just blocks 18 metres more. They're looking at any level of any block. And obviously they are risk averse. They're concerned about lending on these properties and then finding that actually they have no value at all, or they're unsaleable. And presumably they already have within their lending portfolio a considerable number of apartments, flats that are already in blocks that may have cladding. And it was the Secretary of State who made the announcement. Huge backlash from UK Finance, and for your listeners, UK Finance represents all the lenders. all the lenders, even the building societies as well.
Are the government trying to bully them?
I think they know there's a huge issue, and I've had 2 conversations with government today. It's not going to go away, and it's not going to be cured quickly. And this fact that properties that don't have cladding don't need an EWS form. Super. Who's going to tell you it hasn't got cladding?
Yeah.
Who's going to tell you? That's why the Chartered Surveyors have said, well, we're going to recruit 2,000 inspectors. Currently, there are less than 300 inspectors in the whole of the UK that can issue these EWS forms. The other complication is that the EWS form is in the ownership of the freeholder, not the leaseholder.
Yep.
And the freeholder has no legal obligation to get an EWS form for the block that he owns. And of course, there's a cost attached to that. So how do you know it's got cladding? Well, Chartered Surveyors are saying, well, if it's got external panels, it may have cladding. Well, do you know what an external panel looks like? There's another thing called a brick slip, which many of you will not know what a brick slip is. Basically, it looks like a brick, but actually it's a tile. So it's identical to a brick, but it's actually a tile.
Okay, so sorry, just to interrupt you there, Mark. So what you're saying is they're going to have to recruit hundreds more assessors. Well, that's going to take a real long period of time. I mean, in the meantime, why have they announced that this is all going to be okay? It doesn't make sense.
Oh, well, this is politics, isn't it, Carl?
Well, so it would seem, but unfortunately, politics playing with people's heart in these times with their money and their stress and everything.
Well, it's. I mean, we hear a huge number of horror stories. It's not just confined to London. It's Manchester, Liverpool, where people are actually locked in a property that cannot be sold. And if you look at some of the correspondence from the lenders, their recommendation to valuers is to list it as at 0 value.
Yeah, well,
nothing's at 0 value.
Russell, what's your thoughts on this? I know that you've followed this situation.
Yeah, I mean, look, my initial thoughts are that we are where we are, and it's astonishing that we are 3.5, nearly 4 years on. That all it seems has happened in that 3.5 to 4 year period is that a blame game has ensued, and it's been done on the basis of who paid. Now, the first parties here that should absolutely 100% definitely and absolutely not pay is the leaseholders, the people that in good faith have bought these properties to live in or to invest in and rent out. So look, to me, and I also don't think the taxpayer should pay, but look, there are developers, there are landlords, and of course insurance companies, whether it's buildings insurance or NHBC Zurich type insurers, that I'm afraid will have to foot the bill for this. And if they feel that there is a case to answer in terms of a local authority or the planning inspectorate or the building regulations, the building control process, well, then they'll have to seek legal retribution thereafter. But of course, where we are now 4 years on is that there's about 500,000 properties caught in this cladding trap. And I guess what I would say is apart from the financial implications of that, you've got all of these people still living in properties, of course, that are potentially dangerous. They could potentially ignite as a consequence of what happened in a similar fashion to Grenfell, and that just doesn't bear thinking about. So I think the government have been terribly slow. I'm not at all surprised that we've had miscommunication from the government, because I think that they've got a wonderful track record of miscommunicating over the last few months, particularly around COVID, Brexit, and goodness knows what else. And I say that as a Conservative voter. I think their PR, dare I say, has been absolutely abhorrent. But the final thing is the lenders need to be very, very careful, because if I was a buy-to-let investor owning 10 of these flats that technically had a 0 value, do you know what I'd do? And particularly if I had big mortgages on them, I'd go and hand the keys back.
Yeah.
And it would be reminiscent of 89, 90 when lots and lots of people did that because they were in negative equity. Now, if Santander, HSBC and the like want to end up owning 100 or so thousand flats, 200,000 or so flats that they have already earmarked as 0 value, then they want to be very, very careful what they wish for, because of course they're going to be left holding assets of 0 value with huge debt they I'm sure won't be able to track down the individuals in terms of trying to get money back from them, because, as I say, they'd have a legal case, I'm sure, that they bought in good faith. So I think, the lenders need to take a bit more responsibility here, as does the government, but certainly so do the landlords, the developers and the insurance companies. It's a mess, but it's completely and utterly unacceptable.
Someone's got to sort it out, though. I mean, Robert Jenrick, the Housing Secretary, in his defence, did say, through no fault of their own, some of these flat owners have been unable to sell or remortgage their homes, and this cannot be allowed to continue. But unfortunately, it would seem that it is being allowed to continue. Paul, who do you think's at fault for this?
Well, I agree with a lot what Russell says, which might be a first time, but I would actually say that there has been so much blame game. I mean, I've heard some absolute horror stories. I can say of, I think I think Russell's right. I mean, there's actually 11,300 cladding buildings across the country that have been affected, and there's people trapped. Mortgage companies don't want to lend. People are stuck in a rut. And actually, they're getting these massive bills. I mean, I've heard of one bill, one lady, she's had a bill for £78,000, and then I've heard another one of a guy that had 2 properties in a development in Manchester. He has to sell one to pay the other bill, and are these freeholders going to forfeit on the leases? And I think Russell's right. I mean, you could see mass possessions, and I think there is, I think there's an answer to call with regard to the insurance companies as well. But it's dragged on and on and on, and it doesn't help the individuals.
Without that, there's a tipping point out there, isn't there? That's the scenario. Yeah. If the government, I just feel that the government should put somebody in charge to take responsibility to deal with this. I think if they...
You can't let these regulation. It's all very well Robert Jenrick saying, "Oh yeah, this is terrible. We need to sort it out." He is a lawmaker. He's a legislator. So there's nothing stopping rushing a bill through Parliament as a private member's bill or as a government bill, which compels developers, insurers and landlords to bite the bullet and get this sorted out. Because frankly, let's be honest, if you're a developer or a landlord and it's been left to chance or to something voluntary, there's no way that anyone's going to step forward and say, "Oh yeah, I'll stick my hand up.
Going to pass the cost on."
Yeah, we had 500 buildings. It's not going to happen. So the government can't sidestep and abdicate responsibility. This is what we look to government to do: is to protect their citizens. It's actually their first role in office. So sidestepping it by saying, "Oh yeah, isn't it terrible?" It's just the most ridiculous foolishness I've ever heard.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I think we've heard quite a bit of foolishness from this government over the last 6 months, unfortunately. But look, we're going to go to a break. I know this is going to roll on. I said this in last month's programme or whatever. But when we come back, we'll be chatting to Paul Champlina, who's going to give us an eviction update. Today we're out of lockdown 2. Hurrah! And into the 3 tiers, which sounds like a popular pub. It probably wouldn't be open if it was a popular pub, that's for sure.
A very sad pub.
So if you've got a question for Paul on evictions, then text him on 0737 66 11 033. Messages on Twitter at LGR Talk Property or email studio@lgr.co.uk. If you have a question about evictions, the process or what comes next, whatever it is. We'll be back soon.
LGR. Duplex Care Limited sponsors LGR's Talking Property with Carl Knipe.
Δημητρίου in English. 020 88 89 98 88.
When the unexpected happens in your property, it's good to know Duplex Care is here to help 365 days a year. Whether you're looking for landlord support or peace of mind for your own home, our extensive plumbing, heating, gas and electrical services are on standby, ready to help. Duplex Care has become recognised as one of the best, most reliable and competitively priced companies in the industry. Our success comes from the quality of our team, our dedicated online staff, our engineers in the field and from over 15 years experience. We offer packages with 4 levels of cover and our landlord plan is specifically tailored to the property rental market. Visit duplexcare.co.uk or call 01992 621 383. Let Duplex care for you.
Carl Knipe on LGR's Talking Property, sponsored by Duplex Care Limited.
Welcome back, everybody. Now, evictions. What's the score on the moving door and where are we with the eviction process? Now we're out of lockdown 2 and entered the land of the tiers. Shamps, can you bring us right up to date and explain to our listeners what can or cannot happen and in what tier, if there's any differences?
Carl, it's a nightmare. What can I say? I mean, I can tell you, we've taken on 2 more staff members this week. The government, 3-4 weeks ago, or the court system, have introduced another new procedure to slow up the process of a landlord getting their property back, because they want to stop the glut of homelessness. So there's a new process called review hearing. So you wait all these months, and don't forget, and I said before, any landlord that had a case prior to COVID, they're the worst affected. I've got one landlord, Vanessa. She's owed 2 years rent arrears, okay? And she's got 2 hopes in trying to collect that money back, Carl. Bob Hope and No Hope, right? The reality is, it's horrendous to try and get the property back. She had a possession order, and 3 days before the eviction, she get a letter from the court to saying it was suspended. That was in April. We're now in December. She still doesn't have a date. And then when we went to Tier 2, Tier 3, prior to lockdown, courts, bailiffs, county court bailiffs saying we're not going to go ahead. Then there's an amnesty between the 11th of December and 11th of January. Yeah. And then they're saying they have to restart. Then the government, with some pressure, we gave some pressure, and the NRLA, the National Residential Landlord Association, gave some pressure. And they said severe cases, you can use a high court enforcement officer. So they've come to their wisdom to say severe cases are rent arrears owing of 9 months or more prior to March this year. Okay, which means at today you'll be owed 17 months rent arrears. Okay, you can use a high court sheriff to do an eviction, or in a scenario if there's severe antisocial behaviour, squatting and so forth. So it's still a complete nightmare. I've had landlords that have got cases that have been in the court system 1.5 years, and of course landlords are individuals. You know, they have to treat it as businesses. And you know, I tell you, Carl, as a business owner, would you be able to afford losses of 12 months or more? I mean, the reality now is when you have to serve a notice, it's a 6-month notice, okay? Then if the tenant does not pay up or leave, if you're lucky enough, and I've got landlords, when there's rent arrears of 4 months owing, they're saying, we're hoping the rent arrears goes to 6 months, because if it's 6 months or more, it's only 4 weeks rent arrears, rather than 6 months. But if the tenant doesn't leave after 6 months, then we've got to issue court proceedings, get a court order, have a review hearing to see if it's a priority case. You've got to wait 8 months. You could be owed 12 to 14 months rent arrears. That's why we started this mediation business, the property redress scheme, to try and do deals with tenants and, you know, encouraging letting agents to do deals, you know, write off the rent arrears, get them to leave earlier to avoid court. It is a real nightmare, and it's tough times for landlords, Carl.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots and lots of good tenants. We all know that, but there's
most definitely loads of great tenants.
But there is obviously some that have always played the system, and this system's just made for them, isn't it? I mean, on the finance side, I see some letting agents, landlords, and a major lender have joined forces to call on the government to introduce interest-free government guaranteed rent arrear loans for tenants, similar to the schemes launched in Wales and Scotland this year. Calls come in a letter signed by a leading organisation within the housing market, including Arla Property Mark, the National Residential Landlord Association, and the Nationwide Building Society, as well as it's backed by debt campaigners including Citizens Advice and The Big Issue. They all say that unless the government acts, hundreds of thousands of people who rent their homes face an uncertain future, but I think that's definitely the case for the landlords who homes these people rent as well. Mark, I'm going to bring you in here. Mark, many people are worried about the risk of losing their homes because the rent arrears are rising through no fault of their own. Surely the government should and must step in now. It's obvious this COVID crisis is continuing without abeyance to do something.
Well, I think they are. Certainly, I've had a conversation with the government today on arrears, and they are very keen on knowing what is happening with arrears. I think a lot of the arrears will really come to the fore when the furlough ends at the end of March, and we're already seeing mass redundancies out there, but at the moment they've got some support. But the government is keen to look at it. Whether they're going to do anything about it, we don't know. And you know, I feel for some of the people that Paul's talking to, and we hear the same story that landlords are not cash rich. They can't go on in perpetuity accepting no rent. And we know at the beginning of lockdown 1 we had those that can't pay and those that won't pay, and a lot of people have sort of fallen on the back to say, actually, I can't do it. What are you going to do about me?
Well, I think the to me, this is just another example of the government being reactive, not proactive. I mean, I think that is half the problem. And this is, I think, one of the major criticisms of people that I speak to about this government's handling of the whole COVID situation, that they are just reacting to things. There's no real plan. They've not thought it through. They've not dealt with it. It seems to me that no one's taking responsibility for certain sections and certain issues. And I know that where landlords are concerned, they just cannot carry on subsidising struggling tenants indefinitely while it seems allowing, with no say for the Treasury, to raid or dip in and use landlords' money, because indirectly that's what they're doing. They're using landlords' money to prop up the private rental sector. Don't you agree, Russell?
Yeah, I mean, if Rishi Sunak was on this call, he'd be saying, look, I've sucked £300 billion into supporting the economy and businesses and so on. But that doesn't wash really, because landlords over the last 3 or 4 years have had successive kicks in the teeth. We've had stamp duty penalties, we've had the reduction in tax relief on their mortgages, and it does seem that the government are kind of hanging landlords out to dry, and without any regard for a kind of, I suppose, for want of a better phrase, a means testing around whether that tenant kind of is genuinely in need insofar as not being able to pay the rent. So, and look, let's not be insensitive, as I can certainly be accused of sometimes. There are people that have lost their jobs, but actually unemployment is only at 4.5%. So whilst we do hear a lot about Arcadia and Debenhams and, TM Lewin and all the other retailers that have unfortunately gone to the wall, the majority of people, are being supported. So the majority of people have been on furlough. So they've been on 80% of salary without the opportunity to go out and spend the other 20% on things in the high street and in shops and pubs, because for the last few months, those things have been closed. So I failed to see, Carl, really, how there is such an enormity of arrears. I guess it back to Mark's point, really. There are definitely those in need, but I think a lot of tenants are taking liberties on the basis they know they can't be evicted, and so I have to question the wisdom of interest-free government-backed tenancy arrears loans, because if I was a tenant intent on not paying my rent and I knew I wasn't going to get kicked out, well, I wouldn't take out an interest-free loan. I wouldn't bother, because I'm not going to get kicked out.
I think on that point, Russell, I mean, you've hit I think the reality is, I've been doing this for 28 years, is practically, I'd go as far to say 90% of landlords never pursue the tenant for rent arrears. Bearing in mind now we're in unprecedented time, the rent arrears levels are going to be 3-4 times higher than what they normally would be, because it takes so much longer. The whole point of the tenant saver loans, and we really got behind it at Landlord Action and at Hamilton Fraser, was that obviously the money is lent to the tenant to pay the rent arrears, proving they've been affected by COVID with regard to their job, and it's paid directly to the landlord. Let's be very clear about this. It's not like universal credit, where it's paid directly to the tenant, and sometimes they obviously keep the money. But the argument we're hearing from the government, I mean, obviously, Mark's been having those conversations as well, is that we've supported you enough. There's 2.5 million people on universal credit. We're paying that money, and that money goes to landlords. So it's about sustaining tenancies as well, and I think under enough pressure the government may possibly buckle, but it's tough.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, in the meantime, as you said, that there's lots and lots of poor landlords who are really suffering there, where some of these tenants either can't or won't pay their rent regularly. But I think that the whole overall situation to me seems that there's large parts of government housing policy which is in shambles. It's ill-conceived and badly managed out here in the real world. Evictions, rent arrears and financial disaster, I have a feeling, will become the major housing topic of 2021 once COVID is finally under control.
I think that a lot of landlords are really considering whether they want to remain in the PRS.
Yeah,
because of what you've just said, the continual focus on stamping them down, and we've now got the spectre possibly of capital gains tax being significantly increased. And I know, talking to people who are landlords, that there's a real, do I actually want to be part of this anymore?
Yeah. Let's hope they're not a landlord, Mark, with bad rent arrears and their properties full of cladding.
Well, and can I
perfect storm, Paul.
The wider one there as well is that over the last 30 or 40 years, through successive governments, social housing simply has fallen by the wayside. I mean, build about 3,000 council houses a year, as opposed to 300,000 a year in the 50s. And the sector that has bridged the gap that has kind of made up the running is the private landlord. And a large element of private landlords are renting to people that are on housing benefit. If you scare private landlords out of the sector, I guess, look, here's my question, maybe to my colleagues on this call or to listeners, if there's anyone from the government listening, who on earth is going to provide the housing that particularly the vulnerable and people in a social housing, a subsidised social housing situation need?
Well, there'll be plenty of flats handed back, so there'll be plenty of those flats that the lenders will own, and so there'll be a level of social housing there.
I have seen a change, Carl, in one sense, when I speak to landlords, that we are seeing landlords now worrying about the type of tenants they're putting in. And let's be very clear, the vast majority of tenants out there are really good, and they communicate and they're transparent, and having a good relationship, good communication with your tenant is paramount. But we are seeing now a lot more landlords thinking, you know what, I don't want to use a letting agent for whatever reason. I want to have bigger, greater security. I'm going to do 3 and 5 year guaranteed rent deals, leases with my council, so I don't have any void. And we're seeing a lot of that happening now, when we never used to have that.
Well, maybe that's the government strategy. Guys, we've got to move on. We're going to go to another break. But when we come back, I'm going to be asking my guests, is the housing market an integral part of Rishi Sunak's economic recovery? Or is he now going to throw it to the wolves? So let's hear from you with your thoughts. Perhaps you think property prices collapsing in 2021 is a good thing. If so, why are you hoping? If so, are you hoping to move in 2021? Just want calm and steady property prices? Text us on 0737 66 11033. Messages on Twitter at LGR Talk Property, or email studio@lgr.co.uk. Come on, you know you want to.
LGR.
Duplex Care Limited sponsors LGR's Talking Property with Carl Knipe.
Η εταιρεία Esas Prison Sun ανακοινώνει ότι έχει κλείσει το κατάστημά της στο Tampa Lane, αλλά οι πωλήσεις συνεχίζονται κανονικά μέσω του ίντερνετ. Μπορούν να σας προμηθεύσουν στην πόρτα σας, σε οποιοδήποτε μέρος του Ηνωμένου Βασιλείου, και αν ξοδέψετε πάνω από 100 λίρες, η παράδοση είναι δωρεάν. Αν επιθυμείτε να παραλάβετε τα εμπορεύματά σας προσωπικά από το κατάστημά τους, μπορείτε να τους επισκεφτείτε στη διεύθυνση 19 Ferdinand Street, London, NW1 8EU. Για περισσότερες πληροφορίες και μεγαλύτερες ποσότητες, τηλεφωνήστε στο 0207 48 59 733. Η διεύθυνση ευχαριστεί την πολυπληθή πελατεία της και όλη την παροικία για τη μακροχρόνια στήριξή της. www.aspris.co.uk.
The Village Greek restaurant in Barnet has been working throughout the pandemic, providing truly authentic Greek food. We've been providing a takeaway service as well as free local deliveries. You can order easily on the Village Greek app and receive 5% discount when you download it. We're also on Just Eat, Uber Eats and Deliveroo. And of course we are following all the government guidelines on coronavirus. Call us on 0208 449 1341 or visit thevillagegreek.co.uk.
Carl Knight on LGR's Talking Property, sponsored by Duplex Care Limited.
Great to have you back. Paul, just got a text come in. I'll just ask you this before we move on. My landlord wants me out. I always pay on time, and I am not in arrears. I cannot find anywhere to move to, as there seems to be very little in my area to rent. How long would it take him to evict me if I don't move out? I think we've probably already answered that, but...
Yeah, I mean, you know what? That's why they are going to be on a greater subject now on the Section 21 of the 2-month notice, which we knew it as it was. It's now a 6-month notice. That will be abolished in the next 12 months, in my opinion. And they call it non-faults. I mean, obviously, must be really stressful for a tenant when you've been a good tenant and the landlord, for whatever reason, most probably because they want to move in or sell. Where they're at is that landlord should have served a 6-month notice on that tenant, on that person, and really they're looking at another 6 months on top. So they've got a year. You know, you're still contractually liable for the rent, so still pay the rent, which is very important. So do not worry. You know, you actually are in quite a strong position as a tenant.
Right, that's good. Guys, as we said, we're moving on. Our old friend Mark De Silva, writing for the online publication Property Eye last week, said that David Hanna, leading tax expert, founder and principal consultant at Cornerstone Tax, has said the government must extend the stamp duty holiday or risk seeing the housing market go into sharp reverse in 2021. Mr Hanna went on to warn the government that if stamp duty holiday is not extended beyond the end of March, the UK's housing market could see a significant decline. Is he right, Russell, or is he just scaremongering?
No, I mean, it's right that there's going to be a cliff edge, and that's what happens when you announce a respite, a holiday, and then say exactly when the end of that's going to be. So it's pretty obvious that, not only has it fueled more transactions from those that were kind of waiting to do something, those that have, let's say, are subject to the kind of pent-up demand as a consequence of down. But what it also does is pull transactions forward. So those that were thinking of moving kind of spring, summer next year, of course, they're going to try and pull it. And let's be clear, look, the stamp duty holiday saves the average buyer about £4,500. But even at the top end, where the market now is really starting to accelerate, if you buy £1 million or anything over £500,000, you save £15,000. So I think the wisdom of that has to be called into question. Can I see Rishi Sunak extending it? I mean, I think the question needs to be asked much nearer the time, because it will depend what the economy is doing and how things look. I definitely don't think we're going to get any decisions, this side of February, March, really. But he's pretty stuck, because if he extends it, what does he then do when that runs out? He'll be called on to extend it again, and then again, and then again. And the take from a Treasury perspective in terms of what stamp duty is worth to the government in income terms is about 9 billion, so billion with a B, £9 billion a year. That is not something, particularly under the circumstances where we've now ramped up our debt by 200 to 300 billion quid. That's not an amount of money that the government is going to give away permanently. So I think the answer probably, if I was Sunak, I would do something by way of a taper. So, to say, OK, well, look, let's gradually increase stamp duty again. The other problem, of course, digress very slightly, but it's relevant, is all of the people that are starting to think about selling and buying now and into January will miss the boat, because conveyancers and surveyors in particular, local authorities where searches are concerned, are completely clogged up. So buying a home in January thinking you'll get in before the end of March, it is extremely unlikely that you will. So you're going to get a lot of people that might get to the end of March, miss the boat. We could then see huge fall-throughs. So, the pipeline that agents are carrying of property sales now could, if the boat is missed, so to speak, that could all kind of fall into a heap on the floor on April the 1st.
Mark, you got any inside information for us? Come on, no one's listening.
Inside information. The Treasury is extremely tight-lipped at the moment. However, they have acknowledged that they recognise it is of national importance. And as you know, Carl, the property market's all about sentiment, isn't it?
Yes.
And it's about confidence. They realise how much the property market is worth in terms of stamp duty, but I think they also realise how important the property market is to the economy of the UK. An economist said to me last week that actually the property market is entirely separated now from other economic activity. I mean, who would have predicted at the beginning of lockdown, actually, that when we came out and then for the forthcoming months, the property market would be running away with itself. And part of that is stamp duty, and part of that is actually complete lifestyle changes. I know, Russell, you obviously did hindsight predict it. But as you say, the conveyancers is at logjam. They're not even taking any new cases. Yeah. Taper is the answer, but how do you actually work that through? And I know that the market's extremely important to the government. I report every week on it. It's everything revolves around that, and property. The market responsible for about 10.2% of GDP.
Yeah,
everything that revolves around it.
It's all the additional industries that feed in, isn't it? That's why it would seem, from my perspective, when I look at this, I'm sure you guys would probably agree that this is a very much Rishi Sunak's play to keep the economy ticking over. The problem comes is that obviously at the moment looks like we're going to be off a cliff edge on the 31st of March. At the same time, the furlough schemes are all finishing. It strikes me at the moment this is a man who's booked his wedding at 3 p.m. on the same day as the cup final and his team's playing. It's either a schoolboy error or a conning plan, to quote Rowan Atkinson. Paul, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with the guys. I think there will be a taper. I don't think that they can afford a cliff edge. I think that the property market quite has come out. I think what Mark said has come out with this with roses with regard to how strong and resilient it's been. Transactional wise, I mean, we started a mortgage broking business at Hamilton Fraser on the 1st of September. Inundated, but a third of applications have been knocked back. I mean, quite rightly what Russell said, the lenders undervaluing, the conveyances, local authority searches. I mean, even the mortgage applications, I mean, they're so stringent. And, it feels like that a lot of the lenders don't have the appetite to lend. But, I mean, obviously it's held up. And I know Russell's jumping and quirking at the bit, wanting to remind me about the £200 bet that I've had with him.
We're going to come on to that.
May this year.
Keep your powder dry. Keep your powder dry. That'll be on my predictions next.
Well, listen, 6 months is a long time, dare I say, in radio. So we shall see. But Russell will be very reserved and quiet when I do possibly hand the £200 over to him. But it's a marathon, not a sprint.
I won't say a word, Paul. Honestly, I won't jump up and down. I won't resort to social media. I won't trumpet it loudly, I promise.
You did say to me that if you won the bet, you'd run down Brentwood High Street naked.
I think I said if I won the bet, you would run down Brentwood.
Oh, right, okay.
It doesn't. Look, guys, the high streets are not. There's no one there anyway. So
there's no one there.
Luckily, there won't be if they know you're running. I think that's a good point that I think Paul made. Certainly, it does seem that the lenders didn't read the memo, and a lot of them have withdrawn. Certainly from the 85-90% mortgage marketplace, but whether they're thinking it's gone a little bit quieter is on the run up to Christmas. I saw this week that some of the lenders have come back in with 90% loan to value schemes.
A few come sort of fire sales, but if you look at the mortgage lending numbers for October, I think it's 97,500 mortgages granted. It's the highest level since 2006. So there's no shortage of would-be borrowers, but I do understand, certainly talking around the country, that the underwriters are looking very, very, very carefully at lenders' credit history. Have you been on furlough? Well, that's a black mark. Have you had a mortgage holiday? That's a black mark. So a lot of people who thought they could get a mortgage can't at the moment.
I think
the first-time buyer is
furloughing. You're right, Marcus. I mean, I know someone who wants to remortgage and buy a second property on a really good income, got loads of equity, and because he's been a director of a company as a shareholder and they have furloughed some staff, they've knocked him back on a mortgage. Not that he's had furlough, and of course, I think when they brought in the mortgage holiday, which we obviously argued was a deferment, that has now come to roost, and that is affecting landlords that took out those deferments, because I think that they're just using that as an excuse as a knockback an application.
My understanding is I think that the lenders for all sorts of finance, be it credit or whatever, are saying, asking questions. Have you taken any cars on? Have you deferred any car payments? This, that, and the other. That what I thought that certainly people in business thought was help and assistance seems to be now turning to be a bit of a ball and chain around them. That's certainly my understanding.
Yeah.
Look, guys, we're going to wait with bated breath for Mr. Sunak to utter those immortal words, to extend or not to extend. We'll go to a break. When we come back in the final part of the programme, I'll be talking predictions. It's a funny old game. We'll look at what my three guests thought would happen to property prices in the market 12 months ago, what has happened, and where they predict the market will find itself this time next year. So if you have a question or on a property price prediction, perhaps you are 50-50 on moving in 2021, confused as to whether prices will be up or down, then ask away. So I have a text talking property on 0737 6611 033. Messages on Twitter at LGR Talk Property or email studio@lgr.co.uk.
LGR.
Duplex Care Limited sponsors LGR's Talking Property with Carl Knipe.
I wash my hands to protect my family.
I wear a face covering to protect my mates.
I make space to protect my colleagues.
Hands.
Face.
Space.
I wash my hands to protect strangers.
I wear a face covering to protect other passengers.
I make space to protect you. Hands.
Face.
Space.
As we spend more time indoors, we need to do whatever we can to help protect each other from coronavirus. So please, wash hands, cover face, make space.
When the unexpected happens in your property, it's good to know Duplex Care is here to help 365 days a year. Whether you're looking for landlord support or peace of mind for your own home, our extensive plumbing, heating, gas and electrical services are on standby, ready to help. Duplex Care has become recognised as one of the best, most reliable and competitively priced companies in the industry. Our success comes from the quality of our team, our dedicated online staff, our engineers in the field, and from over 15 years' experience. We offer packages with 4 levels of cover, and our landlord plan is specifically tailored to the property rental market. Visit duplexcare.co.uk or call 01992 621 383. Let Duplex care for you.
Carl Knight on LGRs Talking Property, sponsored by Duplex Care Limited.
Great to have you back with us. Now, property predictions are without doubt one of the hardest areas of the economy to call, as Paul well knows. Paul, what were your thoughts about property prices at the beginning of 2020? What were you thinking?
Well, I think I think I was seeing that everyone was in shock. I think what really helped was that the government did something right. Is that they brought the property market back early. Obviously, and they brought that back before a lot of other economies. So that really helped. Obviously, there were some mixed messages about can you move, can't you move, and people being in shock, and obviously with job losses. So, I mean, my prediction was, and obviously we when Russell and myself, we did a podcast show, was that, we had a bet in May that I believe that the market would come down in May 2021. And when we're 6 months away, you've got furloughing until the end of March. It's inevitable there's going to be a lot more job losses. I think obviously the stamp duty being tapered will have a massive effect on that. So will it come down? Will it stabilise? I'm going to stand firm, and I think it might come down a little bit from May to May. I'm going to stand up and be counted, Russell.
So you're saying from May this year to May next year, property prices would have fallen? That's going to be a bit of a drop.
I think the market might come down a little bit. I think, you know what, it's
careful, that fence is breaking.
I think with regard to lending, and I think Russell made a really good point about the bottleneck and trying to get transactions done and people not knowing where they are in their industries. But I think also the way people are living now and people working, being able to work from home has a massive impact as well with regard to life choice.
Yeah.
Carl, the saying, taking candy from a baby? Well, when you have a bet with Paul, it's exactly that. So, are you happy to double up then?
The ironic thing, Mr. Smug Russell Quirk, right, is actually his own in the industry. He lucked out with regard to the stamp duty. I mean, if anyone was going to know, maybe Mark might have known, and he might have hinted. But
What the bet was, I said property prices will not be lower in May 2021 versus May 2020. Now, given that the stamp duty holiday doesn't finish until the end of March, even if prices fall off a cliff in April or May, given that the annual rate of increase is nearly 7% right now, they would have to drop by something like 3 or 4% a month during April and May for Paul to be right. So I'm happy to double the bet, mate.
At that time, when he made the bet, there was no
I think Russell's probably quite cute because you won't even those figures won't even come out from Land Registry until probably August.
Yes,
he's been called worse, Mark. He's been called worse. But in fairness to Paul, I think in an article in the Times back in May, Times Bricks and Mortar, 23rd of May by Carol Lewis and her colleagues. The Times wrote that Frank Knight, the estate agents, had predicted that prime London market would fall 5% in 2020, compared with a 7% nationwide fall, and and then they predicted a gain of 8% in prime London and 5% in 2021. So I think, Paul, you were probably in good company. There's quite a lot of people who were sort of fairly looking in the wrong direction at that point. As you say, Russell had his crystal ball out and obviously knew what was going on.
Well, no, but I thought we were talking about Russell's high-end Kensington mansion we were referring to. Was that right, Russell?
Which one, mate? Which one? Can I just ask a question?
Sorry, what did you say, Russell?
Can I just ask a question?
Of course you can.
I want to ask a question of Mark. We can't not ask Mark the inevitable question, given that we've got the chief executive of the NAA property, Mark, on this call, and there was this today that Mark stayed. Mark's never worried. So the revelation today that, very surprisingly, Mark, after 7 years tenure at NAA Property, Mark, he's going to stay on rather than retire. And look, I think that's a good thing, a positive thing. But I guess the question I've got is, what does that say about the incoming chief executive? Because I have to say, I was very critical of the fact that Property Mark decided to hire someone with no property experience. Is keeping you on testimony to the fact that they realised that mistake?
I wasn't part of the recruitment process. That was the board, Russell. I think the incoming chief executive, Tim Balkan, has his employment history is entirely as chief executives of membership organisations. So I think very much he's going to look at improving the membership offering for our members, which is not necessarily of interest to the listeners. But I think because of the access I have to government and the experience that I have, I think it was felt that during the transition I might be of value.
Yeah.
And hopefully I am.
They could have saved themselves a few quid rather than doubling up.
Well,
they could have saved the members a few quid.
Possibly, and of course Carl is a member.
Yeah, that's.
Why can't it? Well, he should have been the CEO, shouldn't he? We would have got our vote, wouldn't he,
I didn't see his application.
I'm sure the recruitment would have been great when we'd got loads done. Not necessarily what everybody wanted, but we'd have got loads done. Look, let's not leave Mark hanging there. Let's just go back to where we are. Come on, I want your predictions. Not to May. Russell, 2021. This time next year. Look, I've got a bottle of fizz. Look, there you go. It's LGR. LGR won't be having a jolly up this year, so I've taken a liberty of reappointing the funds, well, all £20 anyway, to purchase this little bottle of fizz for the winner of Talking Property's Wizard of Wizards 2021 Property Price Prediction Championship. You won't be able to say that after a couple of glasses of bubbly stuff, that's for sure. So first up then, this time next year, Russell, will prices be up or down? And if so, what sort of amount do you think?
So if we're looking at the nationwide index, which is kind of my favourite index for these things, rather than the ONS, as Mark referred to earlier, I think prices will be 4% higher at the end of 21 versus the beginning of 2021.
4% higher, right. Mark, what do you think?
I think they will be stable. We mustn't forget Brexit that has been sort of hidden under the COVID veil, and we don't know what effect that's going to be. But I don't think we're looking at, a doom and gloom disaster scenario.
Yeah, would you agree with that, Paul? You seem a bit more sceptical, I think.
I think that I think they will stay, but I think they will come down slightly.
Yeah.
For December.
What's slightly, Paul?
What do you think? 1% drop?
I think maybe up to 5% drop.
Down 5%.
Oh, it sounds like another bet to me.
Well, I've got a little bottle of fizz there. Definitely, that's up half of LGR.
Spend the money on his clothing attire.
Yeah,
you must have so much money, Paul Champlina.
We're going to keep that locked away here at LGR Towers anyway. That's for sure.
Come vintage then, won't it?
Yes.
It's probably vintage anyway. I did ask for a case, and the CEO of LGR turned up with an old battered suitcase. I think that's what he thought was good enough or whatever. So, dear, we'll have to educate him, won't we, from the property world. Guys, it's been great being with you. Paul's had his crystal ball out. This time it looks like he's got the crystal ball and not the disco ball, because he obviously had that one out last time. But it's always a pleasure having you guys. Unfortunately, the clock has ticked and meaning we've reached the cliff edge of time for another edition of Talking Property. Let me firstly thank you for your kind, generous, engaging chat on behalf of LGR and the listeners, for your knowledge and time. The energetic Paul Champliner, the engaging Mark Hayward, and of course the enigmatic Russell Quirk. Thanks so much, as always, gentlemen. It's really great having you on, and I know as I chat and bump into some of the listeners, not so much bumping in these days, but certainly on Zooms and various social media, that they appreciate you giving your time in it and knowledge to them. Our next edition of Talking Property will be back with you on Wednesday the 2nd of February, having had January off, so set your reminder to tune in. In the meantime, try to support your local shops and establishments. It's really important at this time. They need your support more than ever at this moment. Stay safe, take care, observe social distancing, stay at home, and most importantly, keep listening to your favourite radio station, LGR, each and every day. Stay strong and stay positive in these challenging times. LGR is with you. Thank you for being with me, Carl Knipe, and our fabulous guest this evening. Enjoy the rest of your night. And remember, sometimes the best thing on a long march is to keep putting one foot in front of the other. Till the next time we're together, be good.